see his behavior had changed, and she enrolled him in another school. But he failed to settle. It was then that his grandfather had an idea. He believed that the boy lacked a proper male role model, so they agreed that his grandson would move in with him for a while. He lived locally, and Alexander embraced the idea. He rejoiced in moving out of the cramped apartment, while his grandfather became the friend he'd been missing for so long. Natalia's father was an old-school Soviet who believed a man must master just two things in life: chess and vodka. My man. The board game was taught to Alexander in the corner of the park, where men and older boys would gather in the afternoon and on weekends to play each other. Alexander quickly became proficient with chess. He'd found a game he could master regardless of the brain damage he'd sustained in his accident. He was able to effortlessly think many moves ahead, and he took great pleasure in crushing his opponents, especially when he beat someone older than him. He also quickly learned to drink vodka. Despite only being 14, he drank with the others in the park while they played, and his drinking often carried on long after the final checkmate. Drinking and hangovers didn't make it any easier to keep up in school. Gee, you think? But he enjoyed being part of the community, and he thrived while living in his grandfather's house, just the two of them and his pet dog. He thrived, really. He's an alcoholic at 14. Whatever. After a few years, his happy life came to an abrupt end when his grandfather died suddenly. Alexander moved with his dog back to his mother's cramped apartment, where space had become even more of a premium. His sister's boyfriend had also moved in, and the two of them were expecting a baby. After finishing the first part of his education, Alexander enrolled in a vocational school, but he usually bunked off. Instead, he spent his days drinking vodka in the park, sometimes with the chess players, but increasingly on his own. Some days would be spent peacefully sipping vodka on a bench, but other times he felt more vicious. As a 16 to 17-year-old, he amused himself by terrifying children playing in the park. What? Occasionally, he would film their reactions as he cornered them before threatening to kill them. It never manifested into much more than a few punches or kicks, but they learned to fear him, and he loved the feeling of power he got as he stared into their eyes, and he wanted more. On the rare days when he did show up at school, Alexander would chat with fellow student Mikhail Odichuk. He had the feeling that he'd found a kindred spirit in Mikhail when it came to gaining personal enjoyment at the expense of others. One day, he decided to share a dark secret with Mikhail. He was no longer content to just terrorize. He wanted to unalive someone. Mikhail, probably thinking it was just a joke, agreed to be involved, and the two 18-year-olds left school to commit this crime. Alexander revealed his plan: find a victim no one would miss, such as a homeless person. And Alexander began to identify potential victims to his accomplice. At this point, Mikhail got cold feet, and he asked Alexander if he really intended to unalive a stranger. Alexander felt the anger rise in him. He trusted Mikhail with his deepest secret, and he thought it was a joke. He was no better than those fools who had teased him at school. So Alexander saw no reason to look for a homeless drunkard when the nearest victim was standing next to him. When the two boys reached a place hidden from the eyes of others, Alexander turned on Mikhail and started punching him with his bare fists, not stopping until he became a murderer. Many serial killers find that their first murder sates their bloodlust for a while. The experience may have felt more intense than they'd investigation. Not long after, Alexander dropped out of school. His beloved dog had died and left him depressed, but he managed to get a job stacking shelves. Stocking, maybe, in a grocery store. And this simple, repetitive work suited him well. In his spare time, he continued to play chess and drink himself senseless. When he was still relatively sober, he would follow the trial of Andrei Chikatilo, the notorious butcher of Rostov. Chikatilo was a serial killer accused of murdering 53 men and women. Alexander would avidly read any newspaper reports, while others were repelled by the gory details. In Pichushkin's mind, the reports became almost a textbook guide. How to get away with murder. Moreover, Chikatilo was just a simple peasant's son, while Alexander viewed himself as an overlooked genius, capable of doing so much more. Why stop at 53? Why not murder 64? One for each of the squares on the chess board. The most obvious crime scene was the park, which he knew so well. As he pondered the details of his plan, he explored the more remote areas of this park, which was mostly forest, just like the day he confided in his now unalived classmate. His aim would be to find someone who wouldn't immediately be missed. Older homeless men were commonplace in the park, all heavily intoxicated and easy to lure off the path with a bottle of vodka. But what would one do with the body once the murder had been committed? Beneath the park ran a large network of sewer pipes, and hidden behind some trees, Alex found a well. He looked down to see the wastewater flowing along 10 meters below. Whatever he threw down here surely would never show up again. Alexander Pichushkin formulated his plan, and he was ready to implement it. On the 17th of May, 2021, he entered the park with the express intention to kill. He sought the place where he'd so often competed at chess, and he played a few games against Yevgeny Pronin, a fellow outsider, but somewhat older man who he knew from the park. He was both homeless and a drunk. After playing for a few hours, Alex suggested the two of them sit down in the woods and share a bottle of vodka. Alex concocted the lie that today was the anniversary of his beloved dog's death. It was buried right here in the park. Sympathetic and thirsty for vodka, Pronin followed Pichushkin away into the woods where no one could see or hear them. The two of them chatted and drank. Pronin was extremely drunk and became confused when Alex started swearing at him. The old man was probably aware that he wouldn't be able to defend himself if Alexander became violent. He didn't react when Alex smashed a stone to his skull. Or was it a hammer or an iron bar? When Alex admitted to murdering Pronin many years later, he struggled to remember the details of each murder. But Pronin's brutal slaying was certainly a trial run for the procedure that Pichushkin would use time and time again. After luring his victims to the sewer well with the story of the dead dog and the promise of vodka, Alex would initially be friendly towards them, but then became savage and foul-mouthed before smashing something hard on their heads, causing them to lose consciousness. He might then maybe smash their face in with a vodka bottle, or break some additional bones. What? You cray-cray, my dude. Or he might just drag them to the well and drop them into the sewer water. Whether Pronin died from the blow to the head or the fall into the sewer, or simply drowned in the water, no one would ever know. Just as Alex had predicted, he wasn't missed. suspicious, and he was never found. Now that he was up and running, Alex's murderous plot started to gain momentum. Several times a week, he picked out a new victim in the park. Several times a week. Bro. Most of them he knew from chess group or at home from the neighboring entrances on Kieran and Sakaya Street. On July 21st, 2021, just over 2 months after Bronin's murder, he took the life of his 11th victim. Dang, bro. Like, that's a lot. Okay. Pensioner Victor Volkov. The killing followed his usual procedure, but this time Alexander overheard the local housewives gossiping. Where did Victor really go? Did the Chechen mafia take him? Didn't someone say he'd been picked up by the police? Maybe he was in the hospital. Fortunately for Alex, it was all pure speculation, and after a few days, it all died down, even as Victor's body floated through the sewers under the park. The park itself wasn't as popular during the autumn and winter months, giving Alexander few opportunities to target lonely old men. So when he went hunting for his 17th victim, the 23rd of February 2022, he switched to a new type of target. A woman. Maria Viracheva had moved to the outskirts of Moscow from a poor village. The authorities had yet to approve her desired move to the big city, so she lived there illegally. During the day, the young woman worked hard to earn money she could send home to her family, while otherwise keeping largely to herself, so she wouldn't be reported to the police. One day, she fell into conversation with the friendly Alexander. He was a little sad because this very day was the anniversary of his beloved dog leaving him. When he asked Maria if she would join him and visit the place in the park where his four-legged friend was buried, she said yes. Unwittingly, she had agreed to accompany the serial killer to his slaughterhouse. When they reached the well, which is what is pictured on this page if you haven't already guessed that, he offered her a sip of vodka, but to his surprise, she refused. She was pregnant. Now what? Getting the victim to drink themselves senseless was a fixed part of the ritual. He would have to move on. He took a sip from the bottle himself before pulling a hammer from his pocket to strike the surprised woman in the face. Dazed but still conscious, she took a few steps back towards the well. Alex moved quickly, and instead of striking her again, he shoved her backwards into its depths. It was cold, so he hurried back to his apartment. He had no idea what had become of Maria. She had miraculously come to her senses at the bottom of the well. She was shaken, of course, having fallen 10 meters, and she had blood running down her face. She slowly began the arduous climb to the surface. When she came out of the well, police visited her in the hospital, where she told them her story. But when officers asked to see her papers, a crying Maria was forced to admit she had moved to Moscow illegally. The police gave her a choice. Either they could file a report of assault while simultaneously fining her and deporting her back to her home village, or she would drop the charge and they would let her go. What? I did not know that. Maria did just what the work-shy officers hoped. She withdrew her allegations and then kept well away from the park, afraid Alex would discover authorities would surely discover that a cunning serial killer was among them. You're freaking insane, dude. The first victim of Petrushkin's new strategy was Nikolai Sarkinchko, and he was no random choice. He was a retired police officer, and Alexander anticipated that the discovery of a murdered colleague would finally awaken the comatose law enforcement agencies. And he was right. Shortly after Nikolai's body was found in November of 2005, police set up a new special unit to investigate the crime. They interrogated more local citizens, and people started talking. Slowly, it dawned on both police and civilians that an astonishing number of people had disappeared from the neighborhood's apartment blocks. People suddenly felt unsafe and forbade their children from using the local park. Maybe the killer was someone they knew. Maybe he would strike again soon. Although Alexander knew very well that the police were monitoring the apartments and the park, he continued with his murder spree because he's cuckoo bananas. Now, he didn't just enjoy the deadly act itself, but he also enjoyed overhearing conversations on the street corners, in the metro, or in the store where he worked. Of course he did. Frightened neighbors and acquaintances gossiped about the murders and speculated who might be behind them. Of course he loved to hear that. Oh, come on. Whatever. Police now had plenty of physical evidence to guide them, because he made no attempt to hide his victims. He usually smashed their skulls in with a hammer and then left them behind a tree, or lying on the path, or simply wherever he'd killed them that day. The serial killer was intentionally leaving so many traces that the police could hardly avoid catching him. Like, dude, what? Okay. He was simply waiting for an investigative team to do its job. And on June 6th, I cannot read numbers today. June 14th, 2006. 6 months and 8 murders after the discovery of the retired police officer, the murderous game of chess came to an end. On this day, Alex invited his work colleague Marina Moskaleva for a walk in the park. He told her the story of the anniversary of his dog's death, and she agreed to walk in the park. What Alexander didn't know is that Marina had slipped home to write a note to her son. She explained that after work she was going for a walk in the park with her colleague, Alexander Petrushkin, and that she would be home a little late, but she never came home. When Marina's son arrived home from school, he turned on the television and saw a news bulletin that a female had just been found in the park. He stiffened and then called Alexander Petrushkin. The killer said he hadn't seen Marina in months. In desperation, the son called his father, who in turn informed the police. Investigator Andrei Suprenko knew that the trail was hot when they viewed the surveillance footage from the park's metro station, and it was showing Marina and Alexander together. So Andrei decided to take action. At midnight on the 16th of June, 2006, Special Forces stormed Alexander's apartment. I gotta put my hair up, it's so hot. The maniac from the park had been apprehended. During the search of the apartment, police found the chessboard under Alexander's bed, with 61 of the 64 squares marked. He admitted he was the killer, but he didn't agree with the police on how many killings he was responsible for. He insisted he'd murdered 61 people, 8 more than his role model, Andrei Chikatilo. But Russian authorities only charged him with 49. When psychologists asked about Petrushkin's motives, they gained a frightening insight into his mind. He replied that murder for him himself merely as a guide who led his victims on to another life. Not as he truly was, a monster who stole the lives of his innocent victims. In the end, he was only offended at the fact that he wasn't recognized as a better serial killer than his mentor. On the 24th of October 2007, he was sentenced. Since Chikatilo's execution in 1994, Russia had abolished the death penalty. As Alexander was found guilty of committing 49 murders, he was sentenced to life in prison, with the first 15 years to be solitary confinement. The killer from the park now sits in a high-security prison in northern Siberia, far away from the place where he drank, played chess, and murdered. So I have to go back because I don't usually read the little tiny squares. However, homegirl in the wedding dress back here, really, I gotta know. Okay, of course he did. Alexander Pichushkin encountered the strange phenomenon that many serial killers experience after their arrest. Contact from admiring women. It's known as hybristophilia and concerns the fact that some people find criminals, even those convicted of serious crimes like serial killers, strangely irresistible. I mean, we're not even going to talk about Bundy or the Night Stalker or Chris Watts or Church bells have also come close to ringing for Alexander. On Russian television, a woman known as Natalia has spoken openly about her love for the serial killer. The two have corresponded by letter for a long time. They were said to be so in love that he proposed to her. However, the Russian authorities subsequently prevented the couple from maintaining in contact with each other. I wonder why that is. They definitely don't do that in the United States. Natalia has said that her love for the chessboard killer remains. I'm choking on my own spit. She still wants to marry him. Even has a picture of him, complete with the chessboard tattooed on one of her arms. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Okay, let's see. The Underground Assassin of Paris. Okay. So we'll read this one and then officers wait a half an hour before finally calling the fire brigade. What? When the firemen enter the house, they are not at all prepared for what greets them. Oh no. In a dark basement room, a tiled stove is rattling away. Ow. Oh, guys. When they open it, a charred human hand falls out. At the foot of the basement stairs, a torch light falls on two almost intact human skeletons. They are beside heaps of bones, skulls, and unidentifiable lumps of flesh. Oh my gosh. The sight and stench overwhelms one of the firefighters, who has to go outside and throw up. Man, I want to throw up just reading about it. A large crowd has gathered in front of the property, but a pale, heavily perspiring man makes his way forward. "Are you a good Frenchman?" the man asks one of the officers. "What kind of question is that?" "Listen carefully. The bodies are Germans and traitors," said the man, adding that he is the brother of the property owner. "Have the authorities already been alerted?" The officer nods in agreement. "That was a mistake. Now my life and the lives of many, many of my friends are in danger," said the man. He added that he must go home immediately and destroy 300 archive maps of active resistance fighters. In contravention of all normal procedures, the policeman lets him go. What? The policeman's unusual behavior is due to the fact that Paris has been occupied by Nazi Germany since June of 1940. Although the French police have been ordered to cooperate with occupying forces, many tried to help the resistance. Thus, the officers initially err on the side of caution with the stranger. Without knowing it, the two policemen have just let one of the century's most brutal mass murderers, Dr. Marcel Piatot, get away unhindered. Shortly after 2200, Commissioner George Massou, head of the criminal police in Paris, arrives at Rue Lesour. He inspects the crime scene, a basement filled with ashes, bones, and disfigured corpses. And in the building's former stables, the entrance to a 3 to 4 meter deep pit. An ominous stench coming from the murky depths greets Massou. He climbs into the pit and finds himself on top of a thick layer of lime and more or less decomposed bodies. He can hear the bones cracking under his feet. The other rooms are characterized by the fact that no one has inhabited them for a long time. A collection of furniture, art, chandeliers, and other precious objects is hidden under a thick layer of dust. The only room that stands out is a neat medical practice in the property's rear building, which has a desk, medical equipment, and 2 armchairs. A door leads out to the hallway at the back of the house. The corridor ends in a triangular soundproof room. The door to the room has no handle on the inside, and 8 large meat hooks hang from the ceiling. But oh wait, if you're not creeped out yet, in the wall is a spy hole. At 1:30 in the morning, Police Commissioner Massou is ready to leave the building and go to Dr. Piatot's residence when he gets a telegram. The German authorities have been is not long before he gets his first clue that Dr. Pietro is not killing German soldiers. A more detailed police search of Rue Lesor 21 reveals, oh my gosh, 22 toothbrushes, a black satin gown, 7 pairs of glasses, and a great deal of ladies' perfume. Women obviously constitute many of the unrecognizable corpses in the basement. Mizzou mentally reconstructs the possible sequence of events. Dr. Pietro asks his patients, probably half-drugged or gassed, to leave the house through the back, from where they walk straight into the triangular prison room. He then, oh my gosh, this case, dismembers them in the large basement kitchen, covers them with quicklime, which dries them and makes it easier to cremate them in the stove. Shortly afterward, the Pietro case explodes both in national and international newspapers. The case removes attention from the occupation, and the Germans ensure that France's censored newspapers write extensively about Dr. Pietro, whom the press nicknames Dr. Death and the Butcher of Rue Lesor. This is him over here if you're always so blurry. Why? I really need a new camera. I've been looking at them. Okay, let's see. Where was I at? Alright. Investigators find Dr. Pietro's brother and wife in the town of Auxerre, 150 kilometers from Paris. They're both arrested, but they deny knowing anything about the atrocities. Shortly afterwards, Mizzou gets a stronger lead when he receives the Gestapo's dossier on Dr. Pietro. Oh man, I don't even know if I can say that. I'm gonna spell it Nazis, arrested the doctor almost a year previously in May of 1943. They had intercepted a rumor that he was running an illegal network to help Jews and German deserters escape to South America. Dr. Pietro confirmed the accusation, but very unusually, and he had been released in January 1944, 2 months later. My mom was born in February of 44. A resident of Rue Lesor tells the police that she once saw a truck with Daumesnil. I don't know what that means. If you know what that means, tell me. Daumesnil. Guess I could Google it. It was on the side of the truck, and it was being loaded with suitcases from number 21 and then driven away. Police soon find this company and a French National Railway receipt for the delivery of 47 suitcases, weighing a total of 683 kilograms, to Albert Neuhausen in Auxerre. On the 30th of March 1944, the police find all 47 suitcases hidden in Mr. Neuhausen's attic. He explains he's just keeping them for the doctor's brother, Maurice. I'll talk about this suitcase in just a second because it says stuff I just realized you can't see it. Okay, any identifying marks on the clothes have been painstakingly removed, and neither photographs nor personal papers are found in the suitcases. But then a Mr. literally looks like Guido presents himself. He says that during the first major operation against the Jewish in Paris in 42, he bought a fur business from his former partner, a Jewish businessman named Joachim Gustinow, who was also one of Dr. Pietro's patients. The doctor had promised to help Gustinow get out of the country for a payment of 25,000 francs. His instructions read, bring all the valuables you can pack into 2 suitcases. Remove all ID papers, photos, and initials from the clothing. What good is a fake passport if the contents of the suitcases reveal your real identity? Gustinow sews the money into his coat, brings gold jewelry and a large amount of cash. His wife remains in the apartment, but she is able to shed further light on Pietro's methods. After dark on the 2nd of January, 1942, she followed her husband to Rue Berg side street to the Rue Lesoir and says goodbye to him. Her husband had been told that he needed to be vaccinated against tropical diseases before traveling to Argentina. When Mrs. Goucheneau had still not heard from her husband after 2 months, she visited Dr. Pietau at his surgery. The doctor showed her an Argentinian postcard with her husband's distinctive handwriting. The postcard urged her to sell everything and follow via the same escape route so they could be reunited, and she refused. Probably smart, because you'd be dead. More families now come forward, painting a grim picture of a cynical, plundering murderer. Dr. Pietau employed several agents to put him in contact with wealthy Jews fleeing the Germans. The price of the escape was usually somewhere between 25,000 and 50,000 francs. He forced the victims to write a fake postcard saying that they had safely reached South America, and then he used the postcards as his trump card to persuade reluctant family members to follow their relatives. In autumn of 44, Paris is liberated, and to entice Dr. Pietau out of hiding, the police get a journalist to write an article for the newspaper Resistance. The article claims that Dr. Pietau is a traitor who is still serving the now displaced German occupiers. A few days later, the newspaper receives a long, handwritten letter of complaint, in which it is again claiming that Dr. Pietau is working for the Resistance. The stamp's postmark shows that the doctor is still in Paris. The police rejoice. They send copies of the letter to the resistance groups via their umbrella organization, FFI, in the hopes that someone will recognize the handwriting. It is the final step. On the 31st of October 1944, Halloween, a man is dressed at a metro station. Oh Lord, Shannon. Arrested. The word below it is dressed. A man is arrested at a metro station in Paris. He's dressed in a military uniform and carrying an FFI bracelet. In his pockets he has a weapon, various ID cards, a ration card issued to a Jewish boy, and FFI orders to travel to Saigon. After 8 months on the run, Dr. Pietau walks into a trap, just days before he was to leave the country. So this year, these numbers are crazy. I want to read them to you. The 47 suitcases contained 311 handkerchiefs, 115 shirts, 104 cufflinks, 96 collars, 87 towels, 79 dresses, 77 pairs of gloves, 66 pairs of shoes, 48 scarves, 42 blouses, 29 brassieres, 28 suits, 26 hats, 28 as serial killers go. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you soon. Goodbye. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our serial killer magazine. Like I told you in the end of our last video, this is going to be about the BTK killer. Now, I covered this case in extreme depth, and it is one of the ones that has stuck with me. So I will link that down below, and for my Patreon people, I will include the link on Patreon. This is one of the cases that I refer to when they talk about killers being caught in crazy, stupid ways. So let's see, because I haven't read it, what they say in this magazine. Sorry about the puzzle pieces here. This table that I film on is like the craft table for the house. It's also in the room where the cats cannot get, so Sean is doing a puzzle and we're just working around it, alright? Because that's what we do. I bought a bigger house and I still don't have any room. Alright. Let's see here. That Friday seemed like any other news day at the Wichita Eagle. With a daily circulation of almost 50,000, the newspaper could boast at being the largest in the industrial city of Wichita on the Arkansas River. As usual, a secretary was tasked with going through the piles of letters and packages from the morning delivery. But on that day, the 17th of March, 2004, a letter stood out. It contained a copy of a driver's license belonging to a woman named Vicki Wegerly. She had been killed almost 20 years earlier, on September 16th, 1986, and her killer had never been found. This envelope also contained 3 pictures from the crime scene, in which the murdered woman could be seen from different angles. The sender's real identity was not included in the letter, but it did bear the name Bill Thomas Gilman, BTK. The reference was understood by everyone. In the 1970s, a serial killer who, in anonymous letters, referred to himself as BTK, an abbreviation of Bind, Torture, Kill, had spread fear and terror through Kansas's largest city. But the last that had been heard from this killer was a cryptic letter in 1979. In 2004, the investigation had become a cold case, and most people assumed that the suspected murderer had long since died. A few months earlier, in the autumn of 2003, the unknown serial killer had once again come into the media spotlight when a local lawyer named Robert Beatty announced he was in the process of writing a book, both about the crimes and the investigation back in the 70s. In January of 2004, the Wichita Eagle had published an article in connection with the 30th anniversary of the killings of the Otero family, BTK's first victims. Now, the same newspaper had suddenly received a gruesome message from the alleged killer. First, the journalists in the newsroom considered the letter just to be a sick joke, but they still did the right thing and forwarded the contents of the envelope to the police. Just a few days later, police investigator Ken Landwehr was able to tell the citizens of Wichita at a press conference that BTK had discovered in a box of books in one of Wichita's public libraries. Among other things, it contained a letter in which the sender claimed to have been behind the murder of a young man in town a few weeks previously. The death had been originally attributed to suicide, which would later prove to be correct. But for Wichita's police, the information caused great concern. If such a crime was taking place, BTK wasn't just messing with the authorities. He was also back on his murderous trail. For Chief Investigator Ken Landwehr, the most gruesome part of the letter was a message on the last page. I've spotted a woman I think lives alone, and or is a spotted latchkey kid. Just got to work out the details. I am much older, not feeble, now, and I have conditions. Have to condition myself carefully. Also, my thinking process is not as sharp as it used to be. I think fall or winter would be just about the right time for the hit. Got to do it this year or next, as time is running out for me. In early 1974, 29-year-old Dennis Rader felt restless. He'd been employed by one of Wichita's aircraft manufacturers, Cessna. But the oil crisis had forced the company to lay off more workers the year before. Dennis was miserable being unemployed. He'd had far too much time on his hands and not enough to do with it. His wife Paula worked as an accountant at the hospital, but she didn't like driving when the roads were slippery with snow or ice, so he made it a part of his daily routine to take her to and from work. He spent the hours in between driving around to different neighborhoods in the city, where he kept an eye out for single women, and he fantasized about tying them up, torturing them, and killing them. As the days went by, he became increasingly preoccupied with a Spanish woman who'd recently moved to his neighborhood. 33-year-old Julie Otero often dropped her children off at a nearby school. Dennis Rader began stalking her. He noted when she and the rest of the family left home, where they went, when they returned, and slowly a fantasy formed in his mind, and he came up with a plan to break in. On the surface, Dennis had always seemed completely normal. He was born on March 9th, 1945, in southeastern Kansas, the son of William and Dorothea. After being a Marine for many years, his father got a job working for the electricity supplier in Wichita. So the family moved to a modest but nice home in the city. Soon after, 3 younger brothers arrived. Dennis became a Boy Scout and went to Riverview School. Despite learning difficulties, his grades were consistently average. The pattern of mediocrity continued as he completed high school and later continued at Wesleyan University. As a 21-year-old, he dropped out of school and joined the Air Force, where he was deployed on several occasions, including in Japan and Turkey. After 4 years, he stopped serving and moved to Park City, a suburb of North Wichita. Here he met Paula in a Lutheran church where they were both very active. Shortly after, they got married, and he got a job in a butcher's department in a supermarket. And he also began studying electronics at night school. By no means did Dennis stand out from a crowd. But beneath the surface, he realized that forbidden lusts were smoldering, and they had been since he was very young. Once his mother had tried to get up from the couch but couldn't because a ring on her hand got caught on the cover. She asked Dennis for help, which triggered a thrill in his body. He loved his mother dearly, but he'd always felt like she ignored him. And now he stood here looking at this trapped, helpless woman who, with increasing frustration, was begging him for help. He carried this vivid image with him stuck them on cards he kept in his wallet. When he felt the urge for sex, he went alone to a motel, tied his wrists and ankles, and covered his head with a bag to make breathing difficult. And in his imagination, he thought about how exciting it would be to commit murder. Wichita was still in the depths of winter when, at 8 a.m., on the 15th of January 1974, Dennis Rader sneaked onto the grounds of the Otero family home. He crept along the bushes in the front yard, close to the small porch with the white wooden house with black shutters. Next to the house stood 2 spruce trees that had been covered with a thick layer of snow for the past 2 weeks. At the back of the house, he found the telephone cable. He cut it with a knife and drew his gun, and then he opened the back door. Inside, he had expected to find Julie alone, but he had miscalculated. In addition to Julie, her husband Joseph, and the children Josephine and Joey, aged 11 and 9, sat at the table, which was spread with breakfast food. Their German Shepherd Lucky was also in the kitchen. Dennis aimed his gun at Joseph and told the terrified family that he was a wanted criminal in need of food and money. He ordered them to lock the dog in the backyard, and he forced the children and adults onto the floor, tied them up, and led them to the bedroom. Here, he put a bag over Joseph's head and strangled him, and then he strangled Julie with his hands. He strangled Joseph with a cord, sorry, I missed that line. He slowly suffocated 9-year-old Joey with a bag over his head while sitting on a chair himself. Eventually, he led 11-year-old Josephine down to the basement and hanged her using a rope he tied around a water pipe. Before he left the scene, he stole souvenirs in the form of jewelry, ID papers, trinkets, and Julie Otero's underwear. Creepy dude. Oh, excuse me, I hate it when that happens. When the 3 eldest Otero children, Charlie, Daniel, and Carmen, came home from school later that day, they found their family and called the police in horror. Shortly afterwards, news of the quadruple murder spread through the city. Less than 3 months later, Dennis was back in action. On the 4th of April, 1974, he broke into the home of 21-year-old Catherine Bright, whom he had previously identified as a victim. He hid in her bedroom, but unexpectedly, she didn't come home alone. She was accompanied by her 19-year-old younger brother, Kevin. After threatening the siblings with a gun and tying them in separate rooms, Dennis tried to strangle Kevin with a sock, but he managed to wiggle free and attack him. During the fight, Dennis shot him twice, and then he hurried to Catherine and stabbed her several times before running off. Kevin miraculously survived the 2 gunshots, but with life-changing injuries, Catherine died in the hospital. In both cases, the police had nothing to go on, but in October of '74, the Wichita Eagle received an anonymous tip about a letter that was found in a textbook in a public library in the city. In the letter, the police were able to read a detailed description of the murders of the Otero family. The letter wasn't signed, obsessed with old police cases about men controlling their victims, and he looked up to serial killers such as Ted Bundy and Jack the Ripper. He dreamed of becoming just as infamous as these monsters. The morning after the murder of Nancy Fox, he therefore called the police from a payphone, tipped them off that she was lying deceased in her home. In the following months, he sent anonymous and confusing letters both to the police and to various local media, including a poem titled "Oh, Death to Nancy," which was inspired by the American folk song "Oh, Death." In the poem, he described how he was driven to kill. In 1978, he sent a postcard to the aforementioned Wichita Eagle with a cryptic poem entitled "Shirley Locks." When no one understood the allusion, he sent an angry letter to the TV station a few days later, in which he stated that, as well as the killings of the Otero family, he was behind the murders of Catherine Bright, Shirley Van, and Nancy Fox. Now, no one could be in the slightest doubt that a serial killer was terrorizing Wichita. Police were on high alert and urged all citizens to carefully check their doors, windows, and telephone lines. Even with the renewed attention, Dennis didn't hold back. In 1979, he broke into Anna Williams's house, but the 63-year-old widow was not at home, and he had to wait several hours. Oh my God, heaven forbid. He eventually lost patience, stole some things, and left. Okay. Subsequently, he was furious that she had managed to escape. 2 months later, he sent a letter with a poem attached to the TV station and to Anna herself. And the title of the poem was, "Oh, Anna, why didn't you appear?" That would make me move. Oh, hold on. I inhaled like a hair or something, I don't know. Okay. So, that was the last thing that Wichita heard from BTK for almost 25 years. So he managed to keep a low profile, but it didn't mean that he was controlling his dark side. While living a normal, everyday life as a family man, as well as being involved in the local church, he was the leader of his son's Boy Scout troop. He still managed to continue to stalk women and satisfy himself with some of the many items he'd stolen over the years. From time to time, he took things one step further. One evening on April 27, 1985, while at scout camp with his son, he excused himself on the pretext of having a headache. But Crazy Man, instead of going back to his tent, drove to the home of Maureen Hedge, who'd lost her husband a year earlier. He cut her telephone cable, broke into her house, and hid until she returned home a few hours later. Just as she turned off the light, he emerged from the closet and switched it back on. After the murder, he put the body in the trunk of his car and drove to the Lutheran church, for which he had the keys because of his, church council work. He covered the windows in plastic bags and photographed her in various positions. Oh, this dude. 8 days later, she was found in a ditch on the edge of town. On September of '86, he called on 28-year-old Vicky Wegerly and introduced himself as a telephone repairman. When her husband Bill came home, he found his wife strangled on their bed. The last victim was 62-year-old Dolores Davis on the 19th of January, 1991. Then 45-year-old Dennis was away again at scout camp, but made an excuse and left. Shortly after, he smashed the glass sliding back doors at the home of Dolores with a cement block, after which he tied her to her bed and strangled her. After the murder, he came back to scout camp, but the following night left again to photograph her in various positions. 2 weeks later, police found Dolores strangled, tied up, and wearing a mask under a bridge over a river outside the city. That was such a strange sentence. After a few months of the murder of Dolores, Dennis Rader got a job as a compliance officer in the Wichita suburb of Park City. He quickly gained a reputation for zealously enforcing the rules. He handed out fines for minor offenses left, right, and center. For example, if someone's grass was too long or a garden hose was the wrong color. Is that a thing? An elderly woman also complained that he had killed her dog for no reason. He probably did. For many years, he was a trusted employee of Park City, and in his own neighborhood was seen as a polite, respectable man. He was a family man, a good citizen, deeply committed to the local church. And ironically, this is how Dennis Rader also viewed himself. There was a clear dividing line between his normal self and his dark persona. When his serial killer persona was suddenly brought back into the public eye in the autumn of 2003 and spring of 2004, he was initially flattered by the attention, and it gave him a great deal of satisfaction. However, he wasn't quite so happy that other people were controlling his story, of course. So there was nothing that he could do except return right. In October of 2004, a UPS driver came across an envelope in a stack of letters. It wasn't properly sealed, and as he studied it closely, he noticed the letters BTK, which prompted him to hand the letter over to the police. 3 months after the serial killer had last been heard from, he was communicating again. The contents of the envelope consisted of several pieces of paper. Some of them described a so-called uno dos tres theory, which supposedly explained the philosophical and mathematical beliefs that determined the killer's complicated universe. Whatever, dude. The letter also contained pictures of, children altered to make them look bound. A cryptic poem with threats directed at investigator Landwehr, as well as new drafts of the killer's biography, including bizarre childhood memories which were to lead the police astray. 25 years had passed since the citizens of Wichita had been terrorized by BTK, but now he was back, and he continued sending cryptic messages to taunt the police and authorities. In December of 2004, Wichita police found a package in one of the city parks. In it, it contained Nancy Fox's driver's license, a doll with its hands and feet tied in a plastic bag over its head. Police feared that the doll was a warning about impending murder. Now, during all of this, Dennis behaved like a typical husband, father, and citizen. After serving as the vice chairman of the Lutheran Church's parish council for many years, he was elected chairman in January of 2005. A natural rise through the ranks for a man who'd been an active and dedicated churchgoer his whole life. A few days later, he sent his next message to the people of Wichita. He left a breakfast cereal box containing information that was supposed to mislead the police in the back of a pickup truck in the front of a warehouse, but the plan failed. The driver found it and just threw it away. When Dennis realized the expected attention wasn't forthcoming, he sent a new message about the box, and police were able to locate it in a pile of rubbish. In February of 2005, he left another cereal box, this one in a rural area on the outskirts of the city. This package included another doll, this time resembling 11-year-old Josephine Otero. Several times, creepy Dennis Rader also wrote directly to the police. In a letter, he asked the police to respond via an ad in the Wichita Eagle, and they did shortly after, indicating he could safely and securely send them a floppy disk. A few days later, the local TV station received a package that, in addition to a gold necklace and the book Rules of Prey, a novel about a serial killer, surprise, surprise, also contained a floppy disk with several messages. For a long time, Dennis had been messing with authorities, but he was freaking dumb and didn't realize that detection techniques had significantly improved since the 70s, and the police are now breathing down his neck. Since taking the credit for the murder of Vicki Wegerle in his first letter, the police found traces of DNA under her nails, which they hadn't had the opportunity to do at the time of the murder. They had taken more than 1,300 DNA samples from suspected men in the Wichita area. In connection with the cereal box left at the warehouse, police had reviewed the footage from surveillance cameras located in the car park. Unfortunately, they were so far away that they could just make out the figure of a man. However, the police were able to ascertain that the person in question was driving a black Jeep Cherokee. The floppy disk would prove to be decisive. He had deleted everything on it beforehand, but he didn't know that the police could check the metadata. And here, the detectives found an empty document modified by a Dennis. They found that the disk had been used at Park City Library and at the Lutheran Church. A quick internet search revealed that a man called Dennis Rader headed up the church parish's council. Shortly after, investigators drove past Dennis Rader's house and noticed, you guessed it, a black Jeep Cherokee in the driveway. So, the police have some pretty strong evidence. They're just really missing the smoking gun. Therefore, the police were allowed to see the results of a test that Dennis's daughter had done at a local hospital, which they do not mention, but it's a freaking pap smear, y'all. She did say that they were allowed to test it, but it was a pap smear. Okay, anyway. The test revealed a family match with the DNA taken from Vicki Wegerle's nail. Her killer had to be closely related to Dennis Rader's daughter. In the afternoon of the 25th of February, 2005, Dennis Rader was driving in his car, as he often did. Same. He'd been headed down for lunch. As he approached home, he was suddenly ordered to pull over by a police car. "Mr. Rader, do you know why you're going downtown?" asked the officer. "Oh, I have my suspicions." The next morning, the Wichita police chief held a very well-attended press conference and announced BTK is arrested. On the 17th of August, Dennis Rader was sentenced to a maximum penalty. The killer received 10 life sentences without the possibility of parole for 175 years. For his family, friends, fellow churchgoers, and neighbors, the revelation came as a shock. No one could possibly have imagined that Rader could be a serial killer. In an interview with a TV reporter on July 2nd of 2005, he himself put the shock into words. "How could a guy like me, a church member who raised a family, go out and do those sort of things? I want the people of Sedgwick County, of the United States, and the world to know I am a serial killer. It is the dark side of me." During the police interrogation, he had said that at the time of his arrest, he was planning more murders, and he had even identified his next victim. He remarked, "There are a lot of lucky people out there." Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. Goodbye. Welcome back to what I believe is part 9 of our serial killer magazine. We still have quite a way to go. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I might not do Jack the Ripper because I did that whole series on Jack the Ripper. So at least 4 more cases in this magazine. I get the feeling that you guys are kind of sick of it, so next week here on Patreon, you'll see something different. Maybe just a regular true crime, or really just don't know all the fine details. Let's see. Of course he spoke to the press. Ugh. Alright. Valentina, Serrani, and Alexander Esau had spent a wonderful evening together. First, they had gone to the cinema, and then to a party. And then at 3 a.m. on the 16th, I forgot to mute my computer again. I always do that. Shh. Okay. Of April 1977. The couple was sitting in a car, passionately kissing goodbye. 18-year-old Valentina was sitting on her boyfriend's lap, with her legs across the passenger seat, when a dark figure suddenly appeared at the passenger window. The unknown male raised his .44 caliber revolver and fired twice. The glass shattered, and bullets shot straight into Valentina's brain, killing her instantly. Alexander Esau tried to duck, but failed. The killer fired 2 more bullets that hit him in the head. While he lay dying on the seat, the killer turned around and placed a white envelope in the middle of the pavement, and then disappeared into the night. Shortly after, the first police officers arrived at the scene. They looked at the lifeless couple, and their suspicions were immediately raised. The so-called .44 caliber killer had been at work again. Since the summer of '76, he'd killed 3 people and injured 4, all young women and couples. Sounds like he's mad about being single. And the police knew almost nothing about the serial killer. But this time he'd left a clue. In the envelope, the officers found a letter addressed to NYPD Captain Joseph Borelli, deputy commander of the task force that was trying to hunt down the infamous .44 caliber killer. Borelli had spoken to the media several times about this case and stated that the killer didn't like women. "I'm deeply hurt by your calling me a woman hater. I am not, but I am a monster. I am the son of Sam. I am on a different wavelength than everyone else, programmed to kill," the serial killer had written in clumsy block letters. For the first time, the police had a little bit of insight as to who was behind these attacks, but no one knew yet that the mysterious son of Sam was a young New Yorker named David Berkowitz, a loner who was driven by quite unusual motives for murder. In the letter, he warned that his misdeeds were far from over. "Police, let me haunt you with these words. I'll be back. I'll be back." What is my computer doing? Stop it. Thank you. Okay. David Berkowitz's childhood was anything but easy. His earliest memory was when his parents, Pearl and Nathan, had told him he'd been adopted, and his biological mother had died during childbirth. This information shocked the then 5-year-old, who later struggled with the belief that he had been to blame for his mother's death. "I am a little brat," he believed. And the thought that his biological father had not wanted him, apparently, either cemented his perception of being bad and unwanted. David was hyperactive and often drove his adopted parents crazy when he ran through the house, throwing things around. He was unruly at school, too, and used to interrupt lessons and get into fights with other kids. He was seen as strange and didn't really have any other close friends. The school viewed him with concern and demanded that his parents consult a child psychologist if their son was going to be able to continue to go there. I can read. For 2 years, he went to a psychologist every Saturday, but the therapy sessions had no effect, he concluded many decades later. During his childhood, he developed an ever-increasing craving for darkness. When his mother thought he was playing outside, he had crawled under a bed or secreted himself behind clothes in the wardrobe. For hours he hid in the dark and dwelled clear that he was developing some pretty dangerous thoughts. Dad, the world is getting dark now. I can feel it more and more. The people, they are developing a hatred for me. You wouldn't believe how some people hate me. Many of them want to kill me. I don't even know these people and they want to kill me. Most of them are young. I walk down the street and they spit and kick at me. The girls call me ugly and they bother me the most. The guys just laugh. Anyhow, things will soon change for the better. David Berkowitz had started to think that he was surrounded by demons, and some of them wanted him to kill, and he could no longer resist. Just a month later, he threw himself into his first bloody assault. Festive music and glittering garlands filled the streets of New York on Christmas Eve 1975, as 15-year-old Michelle Foreman made her way home. She had no idea that she was being watched closely by David Berkowitz, who'd hidden a hunting knife under his coat. As she strolled across a footbridge in the Bronx, he picked up speed and quickly approached her from behind. In a split second, he pulled a knife and stabbed her 6 times, then quickly fled in the direction of a nearby car park. Michelle had been stabbed 3 times in the head and 3 times in the body, but she survived, and she was discharged from the hospital after a week. Although the 14-year-old high school student had escaped with her life, a killer had been born. Berkowitz soon acquired a more effective murder weapon, a 5-shot bulldog revolver. And when winter turned to summer, he was ready to commit the first of a total of 8 shootings. Friends Donna Loria and Jody Valenti had been in town on the 29th of July, 1976. They were sitting in Jody's car in front of Donna's house, talking about boys. A little after 1 a.m., they said goodnight. Then Donna opened the door to get out of the car. Just then, she noticed a young man on the pavement a few feet away. "Who is this guy? What does he want?" she asked her friend. At that moment, the curly-haired white man stuck his hand into a paper bag and pulled out a gun. He squatted down on the pavement and shot. The first bullet drilled into the right side of Donna's neck. The second hit her in the arm. Inside the car, Jody screamed as the criminal fired his 3rd shot, which hit her in the thigh. Jody fell forward and hit her head on the steering wheel, making the horn suddenly blare. The deafening noise made the killer run away. "We've been shot," Jody shouted a few seconds later as Donna's father came rushing out of the apartment complex where the family lived. He could see his daughter hanging halfway out of the car door, fighting for her life. But she was so badly injured she died on the way to the hospital. Berkowitz had killed his first victim. At this point, no one could possibly know that the worst serial killer in New York's history had only just gotten started. After the attack on Loria and Valenti, David drove home. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. Finally, he had done as his demons wanted, as he later told the police. But David didn't have peace of mind for long. He moved into the Yonkers neighborhood, north of the Bronx, where he lived in an apartment near a man who kept a dog in a kennel. Every night, the black Labrador barked violently, and the noise filled David's head. He boiled with rage and sent anonymous, threatening letters to the owner, but the dog kept barking and prevented David from sleeping. His disturbed mind interpreted the howls as messages from demons. Yeah, you're cracked out, dude. Ordering him into the streets to kill women and couples. By April of 77, he had attacked 5 more young women and couples before murdering Valentina and wounding Alexander and writing the letter to Captain Joseph Borelli. It's over here. All these letters. His handwriting is like, I can't even read this to you. All the bleeps I'd have to do. Okay. someone who pretended to be. Among other things, Son of Sam explained that he killed for his father, Sam, who was thirsty for young blood. In a psychological profile published in the media by police on the 26th of May, 1977, experts had diagnosed the serial killer as neurotic and a paranoid schizophrenic person who probably thought he was possessed by a demon. The profile would later turn out to be spot on. A month after the message to the police, David sent a long letter to journalist Jimmy Breslin of the New York Daily News. Son of Sam told him that Sam's a thirsty lad and he won't let me stop killing until he gets his fill of blood. The newspaper printed the slightly incoherent letter in June of '77. In less than an hour, all 1,116,000 copies of the paper had been sold, a record that would only be broken later when the killer was arrested. The Son of Sam killings were being talked about by the whole of New York. One man had managed to terrorize 16 million inhabitants. The summer of 1977 was incredibly hot, but people were afraid to go out late at night. The bars and discos had few customers. Young people in the Bronx and Queens, in particular where the killer had struck, were terrified. Many young women had cut their hair short and dyed it blonde, because Son of Sam had only murdered young women with long, dark hair. Sounds like Bundy. Later, psychiatrists pointed out that his attacks on young women, some of whom had been in the company of their boyfriends, were probably rooted in the serial killer's traumatic relationship with women. His biological mother had given him away, and his adopted mother had died when he was young. Hello? We already talked about this. David also felt awkward around women, and his only sexual experience was allegedly with a sex worker in South Korea. The fact that he went after dark-haired women with Italian or Jewish looks could possibly be explained by anger directed at people of the same lineage as himself. No, he was mad at his mother. Hello? 17-year-old Judy Placido was one of the many young New Yorkers living in fear of the Son of Sam. She went to the same high school as Valentina, who'd been killed that April, when the killer had left his first letter to police. Judy had even attended the funeral. On the 25th of June, 1977, she had finished high school, and to celebrate the occasion, she ventured out to a disco in Queens. I wish they still did stuff like that. That'd be fun. Here she met 20-year-old Salvatore Lupo, and just after 3 a.m., they left the disco together and got into his car. This Son of Sam is really scary, Judy had managed to say, before several shots burst through the window. Salvatore was hit on the arm, while Judy was hit on the shoulder, neck, and head. They both survived David's 7th attack, from which a witness stated he had seen a stocky white man flee. The media begged Son of Sam to stop the killings and turn himself in, but David simply replied with another letter. I'm still here, like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping to rest, anxious to please Sam. I love my work. You are a wackadoo. Ugh. The police in New York put every effort into catching the killer. Nearly 400 men were incorporated into the so-called Omega Task Force, set up to concentrate on exclusively apprehending the Son of Sam. However, it would be another month before a breakthrough came. First, someone else had to be sacrificed. On July 31st, 1977, Stacy Moskowitz and Bobby Violenti were in Bobby's car under a street lamp on Shore Parkway in Brooklyn. The spot was right across from a park and known as a hangout for young couples. Stacy and Bobby were in the middle of a kiss when a deafening bang from the Bulldog revolver shattered their idyllic night. The shots were fired at close range through the car windows, bursting Bobby's eardrums. He'd been shot in both eyes. Oh, can you nothing, but he could hear Stacy's screams and felt her panic grip on his arm. Then she let go and became silent. We've been shot, Bobby shouted, tumbling out of the car, while the killer fled through the park. Son of Sam had killed for the 6th time. 20-year-old Stacy had died of her injuries. The 7th victim, Bobby, survived, but lost his sight. He survived that. The attack turned out to be David Berkowitz's last. In a stroke of luck for the police, he had been fined for parking his car in front of a fire hydrant somewhere near the park. A local resident had seen him throw away the parking ticket in irritation, and the witness had also noticed that the man looked as though he might be concealing a firearm in his sleeve. The stranger had briefly made eye contact with the witness and had smiled so peculiarly that she didn't, at first, dare to contact the police, so they only received the tip a few days later. It soon became clear that the 24-year-old New Yorker called David Berkowitz was the owner of the car. When a dog owner in Yonkers approached the police at the same time about threatening letters he'd received, the pieces began to fall into place. The dog owner believed that the sender must be his neighbor, David, who'd probably also shot and wounded his black Labrador. The police compared the letters to those from the Son of Sam, and there was no doubt that the handwriting matched. On August 10th, a large number of Omega officers moved into Yonkers and spread out around the area near his apartment. They waited several hours for him to leave his building and get into his yellow car, which was parked right outside. 6 hours later, he finally stepped out of the door. He unlocked his car and got in, but before he could turn the ignition, 2 officers rushed forward on opposite sides. "Freeze! Police!" shouted one of them, pulling open the door and aiming his gun at David. "Well, you got me," said the man in the driver's seat calmly. "What have I got?" said the officer. "I'm Sam," David Berkowitz replied. Inside the yellow Ford Galaxy, the police found the revolver that had caused so much death and pain. They also discovered a letter in the glove box that threatened an assault on Long Island. David's murderous odyssey was finally over. When the news of the arrest was announced, New Yorkers flowed out into the streets and into the bars and were giving away free drinks. Meanwhile, detectives questioned the killer, who sat on a chair and smiled smugly. "Oh, creep. Nothing irritates me more than that. Just want to punch him in the face." Okay, where was I? During the interrogation, he explained that it was the local dogs, primarily his neighbor's black Labrador, that had ordered him to commit the murder. Dude, really? Really? The dog, which according to David was the devil himself, told the killer with its barking when and where he should strike. Because the Labrador's owner was called Sam Carr, the name Son of Sam was linked by the media to the dog's owner. During the investigation, it was suggested that David might have been mentally ill, so not fit for punishment, but he should receive the appropriate treatment instead. Okay, we should talk about that one. Forensic psychiatrist questioned him for hours to find out how ill he was. The conclusion that he was that he was sufficiently aware of his actions, and so he should be sentenced. He'd consistently carried out the attacks at night and left the crime scene extremely quickly every time. According to the experts, a mentally ill person would neither choose specific times or hurry away. David, on the other hand, had an urge to kill, and when he felt it, he spent a long time scanning the streets and waiting for the right moment to strike. In June of '78, he was sentenced to a total of 365 years in prison. Due to his confused mind, at first he stayed in the psychiatric ward, after which he was transferred to Attica. Several years later, in 2016, David changed his mind, denying that Sam Carr's dog had ordered him to commit the murders. Instead, he explained that during the killing spree, he had been strongly drawn to the occult and Satanism, and he had communicated pronounced sound incorrectly, and he probably pronounced it Samhain, which is how it looks. And if you really were studying that stuff, Mr. David Berkowitz, you'd know that. Whatever. I couldn't explain it clearly myself. My mind was a mess. He stated during an interview, during his imprisonment, he repeatedly changed the explanation he'd given for his crimes. There have been theories that claim he didn't kill all the victims himself, but was helped by members of a satanic cult. Today, he claims to be a different person and no longer hears voices or communicates with demons. However, he has accepted his verdict. I believe I deserve to be in prison for the rest of my life. I have, with God's help, long ago come to terms with my situation, and I have accepted my punishment. Okay, let's talk about this just a little bit. So, I get kind of angry and disturbed when I hear that people believe that people should not have to serve out their sentences, but just get psychiatric help. And I know that that is not going to be the case in all situations. However, I think of people like, and I switch on this all the time, but like Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She did not get a long sentence for the murder of her mother, and I believe it should have been more. I feel that way most of the time, however, my opinion does sway. I do think that she was terribly mistreated by Dee Dee, but do I think murder was the answer? No. So in this case, when they try to say that this man did this because he was mentally disturbed and that he shouldn't have to suffer the consequences, I get a little perturbed. I don't think that... Do I think he was mentally disturbed? Absolutely. However, I also think that he killed several people without any remorse at all, so I feel as though maybe, we shouldn't be considering letting this guy back out onto the streets once his, medications and mental state are correct. Definitely let me know what you think about that. How do you feel about that? I do believe that these people should receive treatment. I'm not saying that I think that they shouldn't. Don't take that the wrong way. Don't come at me. But I think that we can't use mental deficits as a reason for murder. It's just not. I don't know. I'm sure some people are going to disagree with me. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week for another video, and then we will continue on with this. I knew it was 180 pages. I just didn't realize it was going to take so long for us to get through. And I know some of you guys don't really like my reading videos. I guess because I talk differently, or I don't comment, or I don't know. So let me know if this one was better with the comments. I understand maybe the cadence of my voice is a little different. I get that because reading someone else's words is actually extremely hard for me to do, as opposed to putting my own things together and coming up with stuff for you guys. So I could see how it could be different.